The Stadia community is going through a thorough conversation over the state of 60 frames per second on the platform. What does this conversation mean for the state of Stadia? Is it now forever doomed? Because this is being brought up. Let's talk about it. See as Stadia Community Passions ERUPT over the state of 60 frames per second on platform. It's SDO Daily, baby. Let's get into this one. What's up, people? What's up, people? What's up, people? It is your boy MM2K back again with another episode of the SDO Daily. Do us a huge favor before we get into this one. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Rock those bells for notifications, please, so you know when your boy's dropping these doses. We appreciate all of y'all straight up. Y'all know the deal. Y'all know the reason. And by now, y'all should know the slogan. We are not too proud to ask. And if you're watching this as a live premiere, as a lot of these things are first brought to the forefront as, feel free to hit that super chat button below if you got a comment, a question, or you just want to support the platform. It goes a long way to make this a better platform for you. On to today's story. All right, so what we want to talk about right now is this 60 frames per second, I guess, debate that's going on in the community. Why we think it's a good conversation and what we're liking to see from all parties, and hopefully they recognize in lieu of all of this, right? So we're going to do that by breaking down the story first, explaining to you what it actually is that people, proponents of 60 frames per second, are asking for, and what we hope is being done by Stadia to help influence it, because we get it. They don't develop the games, but it is their platform. So what are we hoping that they are doing in light of all this? First and foremost, let's talk about it. The story. All right. So a lot of us that came to the Stadia platform, including myself, came because we got to play our favorite games in 60 frames per second without downloads and the convenience of being able to transfer your game, that same game instance, everywhere. I love that. And I love that complete and total package of Stadia. It makes it so special. Now, the 60 frames per second portion of it, I will say out of the three, is kind of like one of the biggest things, if not the biggest, in regards to what Stadia provides uniquely. And that's because I used to stream a lot more than I do now. I used to stream on Twitch a lot. And what brought me to the platform was the fact that I couldn't get 60 frames per second on my consoles at the time. I could get 60 frames per second on my PC, but when I tried to stream it, because I was playing the games natively and trying to stream, the hardware was so bogged down, I couldn't do that either. And Stadia solved all that. It gave me 60 frames per second gaming, right, that I can enjoy while I was streaming because it wasn't heavy on my resources. And Stadia themselves identified individuals like myself as the tech enthusiast wing of their target demographic in the early years, right? So you fast forward to what we're kind of seeing now. We're starting to see more and more games being released that don't have a 60 frames per second or performance mode added, right? And then in this particular month that this is being recorded, we saw the release of two games that kind of like really set the warning flags off here. The first game was Ark, which we kind of figured Ark would be a bad port. It might have a 60 frames per second mode, but again, it's a bad port everywhere. You know what I mean? Except for a powerful PC. It was probably a little worse than we expected at launch, but there not being a 60 frames per second mode there didn't surprise us too much. What really surprised us is the second game, the one that could have potentially had a serious impact across the board, was Darksiders 2. Now, I'm not saying it's a horrible port. It's a good port, but it lacks a performance mode. Again, another pillar offering from Stadia that got over the people to the platform like myself, the tech enthusiast. So we're seeing a month where both of the major games that come to the platform are missing a major component, which is 60 frames per second gaming. Now, that doesn't mean that because we are concerned about this, that we feel that the platform is doomed. Okay, so for all my naysayers, the doom and gloomers, or the people I call the canoe folks, Stadia is fine. I do a show with our good friend Jack Deslip, one of the smartest people that I think I've ever met in my life. He extrapolates a lot of data in regards to Stadia, and we talk about it once a month, the numbers show for Stadia. Check it out here, shameless plug, right? And when we're doing that show, we see incredible growth for Stadia, even in its slower months. For a 1% business, cloud gaming right now is less than a 1% business, and we're seeing phenomenal growth from Stadia. So Stadia is fine. The people still love the platform, and it's still growing daily, okay? So all that doom and gloom talk, people trying to take advantage of this, trying to combine our fathomable conversation into their doom and gloom rhetoric, stop it. That's not what this is about. I still love this platform, but as a responsible consumer, I want to see the platform solidified for the future. These are one of the conversation pieces that I feel help in that effort, okay? Next, this is not a call for supporters of Stadia to be closed-minded. What do I mean by that? I want to say first and foremost, look, I get it. This platform has been so unfairly beat to the ground, it's ridiculous. I've never seen a platform so misrepresented in my 35 plus years of gaming, ever. It's the most horribly covered platform ever, and media, YouTubers, and the like should all be ashamed of themselves, and that'll all come to surface as the platform grows. With that being said, it doesn't mean that the platform is perfect. There are things that can be critiqued. There are things that can be discussed in decency and order. And I think we don't do the platform a service when people have the mind state, look, anything negative about Stadia, keep under wraps, talk about it in your own little huts or discords. Don't bring it up in public. Just deal with it. That is not being a responsible consumer to me, because a responsible consumer, once again, wants to see the platform that they love solidified for the future. You don't help in that effort by keeping your mouth shut just because you're worried about grumblings across the street. No, you open your mouth, you be responsible, because here's the honest truth. As someone that's been in the Fortune 500 world for over 2 decades, I can tell you first and foremost, there are some essential things that we as bigger companies, we forget about or we inadvertently overlook. And if it wasn't for our consumers raising those concerns about our products and services, we would continue to overlook them and someone else would provide them and we would lose out on that consumer base. So as a responsible consumer, you are to bring things up that concern you in decency and order. If it doesn't concern you, you can also raise your voice. And that way, that helps Stadia or anybody look at this from 5,000 feet and see how big of an impact this could have. But I never think that the answer is don't say anything. What you're saying may be true, but don't say it because we got to be positive about Stadia 24. No, that's not being a responsible consumer. You can be positive about Stadia. You can go to the naysayers and say, stop it, shame on you for your lies and so forth, and still critique things that are of concern and have those discussions, again, in decency and order, all right? And it's not a call to say that only 60 frames per second matter. That's not the argument. The argument is that not having a 60 frames per second mode, it doesn't necessarily make the gameplay bad, but it makes the state of the game immersion for all questionable. You know what I'm saying? Can you imagine if there were no way to swap your controls, even in God of War? If there was no way to adjust your contrast, someone like my homie Project Storm just brought home his 8K TV with the fantastic upscaling capabilities, and he can't adjust the contrast or the black levels in the game to get the maximum performance out of that visually. Can you imagine not being able to invert or do the opposite when it comes to the axis? Stuff like that becomes elementary options in gaming. 60 frames per second or performance mode should now be one of them. We've seen instances now even in the console world where they were going to originally release Assassin's Creed Valhalla at 4K 30 and they said, hell no, we won't go. And then they re-released it at an upscale 4K 60. You know what I'm saying? That's how fundamental 60 frames per second game is becoming. It doesn't make a bad game good, but what it is it adds to immersion for a lot of gamers, and it's a necessity for those of us who have visual impairment needs. Like when I try to play 30 frames per second, unless it's super stable, I get headaches and my eyes water. and it's far worse for more people. So again, we want to understand what's going on here and not misrepresent the argument. So in that vein, here's what it is that we're expecting. All right. What the argument is, rather, is a recognition that 60 frames per second was a major selling point to the tech enthusiast wing of the Stadia community. Also, recognition that 60 frames per second options are starting to become the norm. I referenced Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And we pioneered that, I feel, as far as closed platforms are concerned. So I just don't want to see, I and others don't want to see us backtrack from that. All right. And we also want a recognition, as I stated before, that we have gamers with physical needs for 60 frames per second. All right. So at the end of the day, I get it. A lot of people argue MM2K, Stadia don't make these games, the devs do. But again, it is Stadia's platform. So we are hoping that they are trying to influence what pillars of its demographic are expecting. So here is what is hoped from Stadia. We hope that Stadia has not lost sight of this and they strike the right balance for all of its demographics as a product/service. Meaning, as much as Google can try to help encourage devs to include 60 frames per second mode for high-paced action games, and where that's not possible, try to influence a super smooth 30 frames per second mode as we see in Far Cry 5 right now. Anything opposite of that, understand that it may cause a disturbance within your community because there are expectations, and we get it. Stadia is the redhead stepchild right now. Other people are looking at other platforms where it might be more profitable for their development or publishing stint, and they kind of do Stadia wrong in a lot of ways. I get it, and we talk about it all the time on this platform. With that said, that's not, and I'm not saying they're doing this, but that's not a thing for us to just say, okay, let's just deal with it. No. People get paid big bucks over at Stadia. They got to make the tough decisions, and one of the tough decisions is, how do we deal with that dynamic while still delivering for our consumers? All right. And I'm confident that Stadia can do that. And if we raise our voices like that, I believe we can help influence those type of changes or that type of solidification. And with that said, that's it from your boy. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below, because like I always say, we're curious what I think. But if you did like what I had to say, check out the links below to follow me. Those links will lead you to the Broadband Bullies, PNTS Network, Hard Knock Digital Culture, and yes, the Stadia Dosage. With all that said, y'all know we love this platform. I'm going to be playing some Division 2, trying to get some more points up for our clan, baby. Stadia's the best. With that said, you all have a wonderful gaming day. Peace.